Homeschooling doubled from 2019 at about 2.5 million students to now 2021 at about 4.5 million students is the largest growth in U.S. history. Why is that? We're going to talk about that today on The Meninist. Everybody welcome. My name is Amy, and next to me is my dad, Poppy.
Hey.
And
Nice seeing everybody.
yes, he is my co-host and producer, so you'll see him pop in and out every once in a while. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about homeschool, but not from the perspective that I think you think we're going to be talking about it, but from a different perspective. And the reason why we're talking about it is growing at a crazy high rate, crazy fast, the most in U.S. history. And my question is why? My question is always why. I was one of those kids, but why? But why? And it's no different as an adult. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. And the first thing I want to do is start off with a little bit about my homeschool journey so that you know I'm not coming from a biased place, but rather a more subjective and objective place of homeschool. And so I think telling my story might help everybody in the audience understand why we're speaking about this today. Last week's episode is one you're going to want to go check out if you have not seen it already, because it does tie in big time to this week's episode. We were taken off the internet pretty quickly, Pop, which leads me to believe that we were telling some truth.
Boy, I tell you what, they got on us real fast.
We were out in 12 hours.
12 hours. We lasted 12 hours. I mean, it was like in and out.
So I immediately put our feelers out there and started getting our word out on several different platforms. So now I'd like to really quickly run through the list so those who are watching can go ahead and subscribe if they would like to listen to more of us. We are out there at Rumble as The Meninist, and Rumble you will see us video action because it has that capability. So Rumble, please go ahead and subscribe to The Meninist, MENINIST, like
I'm
feminist.
glad you spelled it because
yes,
for us bad spellers of the world,
it's just like feminist but with an M, and it is a direct play on words, which will come later. Basically, I'm a complete anti-feminist, so I named it The Meninist because I'm for men. So that's where the name came from, which we'll talk about more later. But we are on Rumble. We are also on Spotify at The Meninist, and that you cannot see the video version of our podcast on Spotify. You can only hear the audio, but we do have it there if you should have a Spotify account. We are on Getter as The Meninist as well, and we are going to try to upload this bad boy to YouTube at The Meninist to see if maybe we could stay. So anyways, we're going to try to stay away from those topics that get us banned, and maybe this one might hold out in YouTube a little bit longer than 12 hours. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about homeschool, shall we?
shall we?
Okay, so I was a public school teacher for 15 years. I shared that story and some of my accomplishments while I was a public school teacher last podcast. So if you have not seen that, check it out.
And by the way, she made Teacher of the Year for several years.
I was nominated for Teacher of the Year for 3. That doesn't mean I got it.
Oh,
I
gotcha.
lost every time to special ed teachers. They tend to rake those awards in because they are very special and they are worthy of that award. So I am proud to lose to special ed teachers. Those are special people, very, very, they're angels. And so I'm proud to lose to special ed teachers. But I was nominated, which is a big deal because not everybody's nominated. But I was chosen as star teacher for 2021 for my district. And it's kind of ironic because I wasn't teaching in 2021. I was homeschooling. But the star teacher can be picked even after they leave the classroom. So that is a testament that I knew what I was doing and I was good at my job, which I was. I was a good teacher. I don't mind saying that. It sounds like I'm bragging, but it's not. I was a good teacher. And my years of experience have now allowed me to speak of the public education system and homeschooling and different things that may be offered to parents who are uncomfortable with some of the things that's being asked of them in the public school system today. So that's first and foremost. Second is I have conquered my first year homeschooling. So I am a brand new homeschool mom. Yay! And so I am definitely not a seasoned homeschool mom veteran. I am brand new at this, so I can also offer that perspective to any parents who are intimidated with the whole idea of homeschooling, because you do not have to be a certified teacher to homeschool your students, your kids. Anybody can do it at any time. So here's my story in a quick nutshell. I have 3 boys. My oldest boy is in the public school system right now, so I do not have a bias against public school. Our public schools here in my county are fantastic. They love our kids. I live in a small community in Georgia, and they love my boys. And I've worked with, because I taught here, I worked with many of the teachers that my son is currently taking, and they have done nothing but treat him wonderfully. So again, I don't have anything against the public school here in the community that I live in. But I live in a very red community. As a matter of fact, this county, I don't want to say it, but this county was the largest Donald Trump voting county in the state of Georgia. The largest. We had the most votes for Donald Trump in our entire state. And we're a tiny community, so that should tell you we are very red, very conservative, very loving of our country, flag, police department, public service, all of that. And so it shows in my public school, which I'm very grateful for. But my younger 2, public school did not work. And there's several reasons I'd like to talk about, not what you guys might think. For my kids, it wasn't the political aspect of public school. It wasn't the latest virus that has come out / medical. I'm trying to use my words carefully. What would you say? Medical, a possible cure for it that is being pushed.
Yeah.
That'd be the right thing to say. You guys know what I'm talking about.
We could say blank.
Yes, the medical blank that now your top-notch politicians are trying to push, and if you don't have the blank,
it rhymes with pristine.
Yes, that. Yes. My decision to homeschool happened to happen right before coronavirus hit, and so I do not have that type of bias. But my decision to homeschool could not have come at a more advantageous time. And I really think it was a God thing, because he knew my boys and knew what they needed. So,
boy, I tell you what, that was just what a decision you made. I know you and your husband both prayed about it.
We did.
You came to a place where you knew you had to do it.
That's right.
And it has paid dividends. Big
yes,
time.
And for the positive. It has paid for the positive. Our middle son, James, he's on the autism spectrum. He has what's called a lack of sensory. So where some autistic kids have a production of sensory, so like they get stimulated really quickly if something different happens in their life. James is the opposite, where he is understimulated. And this has caused some severe learning disabilities in the classroom, particularly subjects that have multiple steps like math. And so in the math curriculum, for example, if you have a word problem and you're asked to do 2 or 3 steps, he can't do it. I mean, he just cannot do it. And it's over his head. And Aaron, my little guy, he's on the opposite. He's gifted. And so he learns stuff like lightning fast. And so you have to be prepared 5 steps ahead to meet him where he's at, to keep him engaged. Otherwise, he's all over the place. He's picking his nose. Yes, he's doing everything but what he's supposed to be doing. And so when James was in 3rd grade, he's about to be an 8th grader. I cannot believe it. But when he was in 3rd grade, he had to take the standardized testing for the state of Georgia. And all students, 3rd grade, 8th grade, and then 9th through 12th are required to take some kind of standardized test at the end of the year. And if you can't perform on grade level, what score do you think you're going to get in a standardized test for that grade level? You're not going to pass. And what the state says is if you achieve this certain score, you are ready for the next grade. But if you do not achieve this certain score, you risk failure of staying. It's called retaining, staying in that grade. But because James is on the autism spectrum, he's covered under what's called, I'm trying to put it in layman's terms, it is a program that is given to a special education student that gives them the supports they need to be able to progress in their classes. Okay, and they're covered under that. It kind of ensures their success, if you will, and they are not allowed to fail. So they might fail a class, for example, and their report card might say F, that they failed, or D, or whatever the case may be, depending on how that school grades. But they are what's called promoted to the next grade level. Despite their grades and despite their test scores, their particular label in their special ed program protects them from failure, which sounds fantastic. And I'm about to get into the why in a little bit, but it's actually a disservice. It's a big time disservice because I asked the school if he could be retained because he did not pass that particular grade. It was third grade. He did not pass his classes in third grade. He did not pass the standardized testing in third grade. He failed third grade. He did not meet the state standard. And I was told, you cannot retain him. We have to place him because the particular protection program in place kept me from making that decision for my son.
So that's a domino effect because the further he gets behind, even though they advance him a grade, he's going to have even more struggle.
Right. So for example, if in third grade you're learning multiplication tables, and that's the main math standard in third grade, to learn multiplication, and you're expected to know your multiplication tables in order to be able to successfully do fourth grade math.
Okay.
And in third grade, you do not master your multiplication tables. When you get to fourth grade, can you do fourth grade math? No, you cannot, because you have to have mastered third grade in order to be able to succeed in fourth grade. So what happens is what's called a gap. So over the years of him not being able to do the work that was asked for him year after year after year, his educational needs gapped. So eventually in sixth grade, he was still way back in third grade because he had never progressed because it just kept getting harder and harder and harder and overwhelming. And you can imagine for a young teenager / adolescent what that feels like. You know, all your...
Yeah, talk a little bit about the emotional part of a child having to be advanced, knowing that he is behind, and you as a parent, how do you deal with that?
Okay. Before I do that, I'd like to give a quick history of how this came to be. Okay. This is nationwide, not just the state of Georgia. So this applies to all states. But in 2001, President Bush at the time produced a bill called No Child Left Behind.
I remember.
And it became law in 2002. And the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You know that line? Okay, well, No Child Left Behind had great intentions, but it did a severe disservice to our special ed population, as well as low socioeconomic status, some of your minority populations. It was meant to try to help them, but it actually hindered them. And I'll explain how in a little bit. But when that law came into play in 2002, it basically made schools now have an accountability towards how their students were performing in class. And the way that the accountability came was through a standardized test. Prior to that, standardized tests were not required. And if they were a national norm test. They weren't a state test. Okay, so if you took a national norm test and you scored in the 60th percentile, that was between you and your parents. It didn't affect your education in school. So this was before No Child Left Behind. But now with No Child Left Behind, what it said is now the state of X, whatever state you're in, must show that you are progressing in school and use accountability to do it. And one of the ways that it manifested was through a state test. Okay, well now that state test dictates whether or not a school is doing a good job. Okay, so if the test scores in a school are low, the school must stink. Versus the fact that there's children all over the educational spectrum has nothing to do with the school's performance. Okay, in the example of my son. Okay, my son's disability has nothing to do with the school he's in. It has everything to do the way he was created. Okay, so, but that's not what No Child Left Behind said. It said at this school, you are going to perform right here. And if you perform below, school sucks. And if you perform above, the school is great. By the way, we're going to give you federal funding too. Because remember, follow the money.
Follow
Remember
the
that?
money.
We're going to give you federal funding. If your school scores below, guess what happens to your funding? It could possibly be revoked.
Oh my
So
gosh.
you better perform at this level. Because if
Right.
it's revoked, we're not getting books. We're not getting school supplies. We're not paying your teachers what they deserve. You're not getting it. Okay. Also, if your school falls below this particular standard, the state's coming in. The Board of Education is coming in, and they're going to basically revamp your school to make sure. So now you have a government entity coming in to quote unquote fix a school. Okay. So No Child Left Behind in theory sounded great. We're going to get these kids who are struggling to up to par. But the way they did it was, well, let me show you what I mean. Hopefully my phone will pull up so I can show you. Uh-oh, I think it quit broadcasting. Let me go to it here. I think it's timed. All right, let me show you what I mean. Because when you follow the money, you will notice that to write a test and have a school system perform this particular test, are you ready, Poppy?
I'm ready.
Cost billions of dollars. Not millions, billions of dollars. So if I'm a president and I'm being lobbied by a school system to have to up the rigor and make sure all my students are performing, then we need a test. And if we need a test, then we have to hire a testing company in order to make sure that test happens. And if we hire a testing company, we have to pay that testing company. And guess what? That test costs billions. Billions. Okay?
Is that taxpayer funded?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. All right. So in a second, I'm going to go into the next stage in basically how the government infiltrated our school system, and that's through Common Core. So when President Obama was elected, he wanted to bridge the gap of knowledge in students if they travel state by state. So if you have a kid that lives in Georgia and all of a sudden mom and dad gets moved to California, it's a completely different curriculum. And now the student struggles. So remember, we still have the law of No Child Left Behind. So now kids are placed if they fail because they're protected under that special ed umbrella, right? And now we have a curriculum being pushed by the U.S. government, which, by the way, costs billions to create and produce and now create new tests for, right? That now we're pushing onto our kids with the idea that it's going to umbrella curriculum. In other words, all the states are going to teach the same thing.
So it's a federal standardization.
That's right. If a
Okay.
kid moves from Georgia to California, when he leaves the classroom in Georgia and enters the California classroom, it's going to be the exact same curriculum. Common Core. The
Okay.
core of education being common amongst the states. Okay? So that's where Common Core came in. So I did some research because I wanted to find out, again, when you follow the money, how much Common Core has costed the states. And basically, I took this from edweek.org so that I would have as accurate information as possible. And right here, it tells you who wrote the Common Core standards. And then it goes into prices. We have some opposition because some states did oppose it. And then we said, but isn't the Common Core about testing? And if you look at that first sentence right here, it says, in 2010, the U.S. Department of Education awarded $360 million to two groups of states in order to create the tests to test for Common Core. Okay, two states got paid $360 million to create tests for Common Core. All right, first of all, I want to know what test. I want to write the test. $360 million. I'll write the test for $360 million. It would be a great test.
Yeah.
$360 million for two states to write the test for Common Core. Taxpayer money. That's federal money. And by the way, if your state doesn't produce at a certain standard, what happens to the money? It goes away, right? Or it decreases. So not only are you being paid as a school system to perform, you're also being paid as a school system to make sure that you are aligning your school system with these tests that are created by the U.S. government.
That is nuts.
Isn't that crazy? Okay. My question is, all that's fine and dandy, but what's best for kids? Because I can tell you it wasn't best for my kid. And my kid struggled. And in 3rd grade, my kid failed. And in 4th grade, my kid failed. And in 5th grade, my kid failed. And in 6th grade, my kid failed. And in 7th grade, my kid failed. And I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to do something. Not only was he failing, but this is the question you asked me. His complete demeanor and psychology was spiraling out of the sky downward as fast as you could possibly imagine. And he became angry, and he became defiant, and he dreaded getting up for school. He dreaded getting school supplies. He dreaded homework. He dreaded lunchtime, recess, it all.
Yeah, I remember he was really struggling big time, and you can tell his emotional status was also changing.
Right.
He was getting very frustrated.
Yes.
As a young boy, and I remember you talking back in the day that you had to do something in order to change him because he was having a real struggle.
And I'll tell you what, before I made the decision to homeschool, my husband and I honestly tried everything that was suggested of us for our son. We tried therapy. We tried ADD medication because at one point a counselor told us he probably had ADD, so we took him to the doctor and he was diagnosed. And he was on ADD medicine for 18 months. Mm-hmm. We tried sleep. We tried taking out red number 5. We tried essential oils. We tried diet. We tried it all. I hired a tutor. We tried everything to keep him successful in school, and nothing worked. Some things would work for a small amount of time, and then it would stop working. And this is not a behavioral defiant kid. This is a kid who loves his family and is a hard worker and was really trying his best, but just could not succeed under the school system policies that he was forced to have, which was being placed year after year in a classroom he was not ready for. And so when he was in 3rd grade, my husband and I decided we were going to do whatever we could to get me home to homeschool, because I knew the power behind one-on-one learning, and I also knew the power behind slowing things down and going at his pace without the pressure of having to pass a standardized test, right? So it took us 3 years. We financially got me in a place where I could come home and not have to have my career to survive anymore. My husband is a hard worker and helped make that happen. And we started homeschooling fall of last year. And I did. I brought him back to 3rd grade.
Did the pandemic have anything to do with your decision, or was it just was that heaven sent?
Well, it was.
I mean, you would think, God, a pandemic being heaven sent.
Well, it was, and I'll tell you why. Our whole state shut down in February.
Yeah,
and remember,
that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yes, it was supposed to be 15 days to slow the spread. We were all home for 15 days. We thought, woohoo! Me as a teacher, I was like, woohoo! 2 weeks home, nice. You don't get random 2 weeks home as a teacher. Right? So we were like, unless it's like a break of school in the calendar, like spring break, you don't have just a random 2 weeks off. So, and we weren't off. We were schooling online. I don't want to give that impression. We were not off. In fact, I would argue I worked harder as an online school teacher than I did in the classroom any day. But all the teachers were like, okay, all right, we could take 2 weeks. Nice. It was scary because, of course, it was a pandemic. And we didn't know anything. And at that point, everybody was going to die, right? Grandma was going to die. You were going to die. I was going to die. 2 million people were going to die. And so it was scary. But at the same time, I now quickly became not only the 120 high school students I was teaching's teacher online, but I was also my 16-year-old's teacher, my 13-year-old's teacher, and my 8-year-old's teacher.
You were doing some juggling.
And literally, I had my laptop set up teaching my 120 while I had one over here, one back there, and I'm trying to do instruction with all of them at the same time. And I learned real quick, what type of students my boys are and what they needed. And online school worked for 2 out of the 3.
So that gave you the opportunity to assess.
Yeah. It was
assess the children and let your kids and say, okay, this is what I'm probably going to have to address.
it was exactly almost the precursor, almost the trial period, if you will, for homeschool.
Mm.
Okay. But the beauty behind homeschool, guys, that most people don't understand is A, you do not have to be a certified teacher to homeschool. You are considered a teacher by being an adult who is teaching. So you don't have to be a teacher. You just have to be an adult who is teaching. You do not have to have a college degree. You only have to have a high school education to be a homeschool parent. You do not have to have a grand knowledge in all subject matter because there is curriculum written specifically for homeschool parents, right? For example, I'm a terrible math person. I cannot do math. I can't even balance my checkbook. Thank God my husband does all that. But I've been teaching math for a year because the curriculum is scripted and shows me exactly what to do. All right. So I am a great math teacher. I just read the curriculum, right? In my state of Georgia, homeschool is heavily protected. So you do not have to report any of your findings or grades or test scores to the state. You do that all privately and keep record for yourself in order to adequately be able to diagnose your child and where their needs are. So that takes the pressure off. Now there's no standardized testing required for my child. I can give a standardized test in 3rd grade, even though he's an 8th grader, right where he's at. And the standardized tests are just for me to know, right?
And that alleviates a lot of the pressure.
The pressure's off.
Yeah.
There's no pressure.
My goodness.
There's zero pressure.
Yeah.
You homeschool 4 hours a day versus 8. And if you want to school 8 hours a day, you could take a day off. You can school year round if you want. You can school 180 days in a row if you want. You can take a week, 2 weeks off and then school 2 weeks and then you can do it however combination works for your family. You can travel in homeschool. A lot of parents do that. They live in a camper and they travel all over the U.S. while they school because you can school from anywhere. You have a computer and some curriculum books. Boom, you're done.
Yeah.
And so the freedom to be able to teach your kids where they are at is the biggest benefit of homeschool. Now, what if you can't homeschool? What if you have to work? What if you're a working parent and you have to work and you're working outside of the home? There are homeschool moms that will homeschool your child kind of like a private school. They'll charge a very small tuition and they will homeschool your child. You have to look. There's a lot of homeschool groups on Facebook that advertise this. I've never done this, nor do I want to do it. My 2 are enough for me. But there are homeschool moms who have successfully homeschooled their children into adulthood and now are homeschooling other people's kids for a small price. So that might be something you want to look into. Another avenue is there are a lot of self-guided homeschools, so homeschool curriculums. So if your child is of age to be able to stay home by themselves, you can put their homeschool curriculum up and they do it independently. And then you come home and you grade them and give them feedback and tell them what they need to do to fix it. There are just freedoms in homeschool a lot of people do not realize. But if you researched and did a little bit of homework, you might find something suitable for your family. And the reason I think, do you have any idea, Pop, why you think homeschool has doubled from 2019 to 2021?
Well, I would think, the pandemic would have something to do with it. And also about a certain topic that we can't talk about.
That's right.
We don't want to be eliminated off of YouTube and all the other platforms. But I'm assuming those two things. And let's face it, I mean, you went over some topics today that tell me that the public school system has a lot of work that they need to work on in order to get to the place where these kids can actually thrive.
Right. It definitely is disheartening as a public school teacher, and you just want what's best for your students, and you know they're going to leave your classroom, not have met the standards, and being placed in the next grade, and are going to be completely lost and unsuccessful.
That's sad.
It is the hardest thing. And again, I want to commend all teachers far and wide, the good ones anyway. There's some bad ones in the pot, who are working hard to do their very best to make their children succeed even with laws and programs that are forced upon them that they can't control. No Child Left Behind, and AYP, that's annual yearly progress. That's the school score I was talking about, and that they have to report for accountability. That is a lot of pressure.
Right.
And it really makes a teacher's work difficult when they are trying to do what's best for kids. And so homeschool's a viable option. Really quick, and we'll probably get into this maybe next podcast, maybe, is the object in the news that requires a needle that we're not allowed to talk about is now being used as a reason to have kids as young as 2 having to put on a piece of cloth over their face if they didn't get the needle. So now the pressure's on for mom and dad to go to the doctor and get their kid a needle. Otherwise, they're going to be forced to wear that cloth over their face as young as 2. So there is options. And the option number 1 I would recommend is pull your kid out and try to homeschool.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're concluding today. Very informal, rather informational, rather.
And informal
too.
And informal. We're
'Cause
just
all in
chilling.
T-shirts and shorts.
That's right. It's hot.
It's hot.
It's summertime in Georgia. It's hot.
But in closing, Amy, we're hoping that people will give us feedback.
Yes, please. Leave your comments. We want to know. And if there's any topics you would like us to discuss or have any questions about,
right,
we would love to do a podcast based on what you guys think and want to know more about. Any ideas for episode number 3, Poppy?
We can think about it.
All right. I got some ideas.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week.
We'll see you all next week. Have
God
a blessed
bless you all.
day. Bye.
Bye.